Hello and welcome to Collector Creations. In this video I'm going to be talking about how I watched 29 Giallos in February. I called it Gialloruary in my letterboxd, and there was no real aim to it outside of watch 29 Giallos, because I couldn't manage the everyday film kind of thing, because I have a social life, I have work life. It's to balance them all, and to also watch a film every day isn't the most possible thing unless I really, really want to hate myself. So yeah. Anyway, so I watched 29 films. Most of this was based on the fact that I had a bunch of Arrow video sets. They're all called the Giallo Essential sets, and they have like 3 films each. I've got 5 of them, so that was 15 films. So I'm like, hey, that's a pretty good start. And they range from like early 60s to late 70s, and then I had a bunch of Argenos I wanted to rewatch, some that I hadn't seen before. There's some Lucio Fulci I hadn't seen, and some Mario Bava that I wanted to rewatch, plus a few that I hadn't seen that some friends lent me. So I want to go through them all now, all 29 of them on my list. Gialloruary. I'll go in order of how I watched them, but yeah, the main factor of what I want to cover, like all the films I watched, which ones I think were good, which ones I think were bad. But I also kind of want to just look at it this way, like, having watched all of these and getting more of a critical appreciation for the genre, which you wouldn't really want to say I have a critical appreciation for Giallo, given that Giallo's inherently, if you don't know, they're basically Italian murder mysteries based on the, yellow-covered murder mystery books of the, 40s and 50s. Mostly becomes from, imports of Agatha Christie stuff and whatever, but eventually they did their own, yellow-covered, yellow jacket kind of books, which Mario Bava ended up doing Blood and Black Lace. Actually, that was his second one. It was The Girl Who Knew Too Much, which is considered the first Giallo. I believe that one's an F Giallo. I didn't get a chance to watch it. There's a few of his I didn't get the chance to watch, same as Bay of Blood and whatever, because I couldn't find them anywhere. So it's a Giallo. It's a Giallo, meaning the color yellow. So hence the yellow spine, the yellow backing of the books, whatever. It's a very broad genre at times, because again it covers this element of you'd think it's just a simple murder mystery, a whodunit. He is a masked killer, they're killing people. Oh, we have to figure out who it is before they kill the protagonist, if there is a protagonist. And that's the basic building blocks, but then it flips on its head several times. Sometimes the films dive more into sexploitation. Sometimes they just have sexploitation. It's we're either going heavy-handed on, hey, these people are going to be naked most of the time, or having sex, usually women, or they're just casually naked while they get changed in some scenes, because we can do that. Most of the time, the easy excuse for the narratives is they're a fashion person, they're a model, they're a rich aristocratic wife who doesn't get enough sex from her husband, so she fucks some fucking regular dude. There will be swearing in this video. So there's that element, the sexploitation. There's polizia techie elements, which is police crime films, where usually the protagonist is a detective, an actual detective. My introduction to Giallo was from Dario Argento with Deep Red, and that obviously is a person who witnesses a crime of some kind, and they end up becoming a proto-detective. They're obviously not licensed or anything, but they do the investigation because the killer is now after them. And that happens in Deep Red, it happens in Bird with the Crystal Plumage. A lot of Argento films, Cat o' Nine Tails, are very similar like that in his earlier works. And so I was coming at the perspective of, well, that's what the Giallo is. It's about people running away from a killer. It's, you know what, it's a lot like the slasher film of the 80s, and that's because these predated the slasher films to the point of a lot of them share not just characteristics, but established characteristics. A lot of people will say that, Psycho was the original slasher film, even though you've got that mixed with Peeping Tom. And it wasn't until, a couple years later, again, 1962, 1963, with The Girl Who Knew Too Much, and then eventually Blood and Black Lace from Mario Bava, where the style of that part of the genre, of the straight slasher genre, was really starting to take form. Eventually that led into stuff like the films from Dario Argento, which were massively imported and exported out of Italy, and then eventually you had the films of Sergio Martino, including Torso, which is known very heavily as one of the biggest inspirations for the modern day, or at least the modern 80s, like teen slasher film, where it's about a bunch of teenagers or, young adults who are at either high school or university, and they end up in a remote location getting chased by a killer, and then it becomes a one-on-one. It almost basically created the final girl as a trope. So there's a lot of things I learnt from watching these films where you see different aspects like that. But eventually some of them were like, you know what? Sometimes it's not as fun to just watch girls get naked and then get murdered. Sometimes we need to also do other stuff. So instead of leading into voyeuristic territory, which a lot of them do, and sometimes that's the fun part of it, sometimes they're kind of depravity in the style and the actual narrative is what makes them interesting. Eventually they just veered into supernatural territory. I'd argue that this is mostly because Suspiria became a hit, even though Suspiria isn't a Giallo. Whether you want to argue it is or not, most people, even myself, agree it's not a Giallo. It doesn't share enough of the tropes. It doesn't even really remotely feel like one. I was even talking to a friend about it last night, and he was like, but that's a Giallo. You got, people getting killed in Italy. I'm like, yeah, but they're not in Italy. They're in Germany. And then he's like, oh, well, what about, he mentioned zombie flesh eaters and the Beyond, and they're zombie films. They're not... Like, his recollection of what a Giallo was just an Italian horror film. I'm like, no, it's specifically, but also not specifically, has to have slasher elements, has to have a masked and or gloved killer. It's either F Giallo or M Giallo, so the F Giallo is usually a female-led film, whether she becomes a detective or not, or she's just being constantly abused and constantly stalked and hunted. That's, again, much like with the modern slasher. Or then you've got the M Giallo, which is sometimes like the F Giallo, where the man is being constantly hunted or whatever, but most of the time the people getting killed are his friends or colleagues. I mean, most of the time it's friends or colleagues getting killed anyway, but it's like end up having his girlfriend being the final person who's getting abused before he stops the murderer, and it's always him being the detective and figuring out. He has the agency to do that, whereas in the F Giallos, they don't really. There's not many F Giallos where the woman has the agency to actually do anything. There's some Luciano films. I can't remember his name. Ercole, I think it is. Luciano Ercole. He did like Death Walks on High Heels and Death Walks at Midnight. Two of my favorite of the Giallos. And those ones go more into that territory of actually the female protagonist actively seeks out, let's find this killer. I want to resolve this shit, But again, after Suspiria, late 70s, by this stage, you're either running out of ideas and like going to different countries to make something different. Again, like the yellow pajama girl case or whatever it was. That one was a... I'm going to have posters up on screen anyway, but that one was set in Australia based on an Australian story. So that actually has Australians in it, and it's very weird. Not a great film, but it's... because it's a non-linear narrative, but that's like the twist, so spoilers. I will try not to spoil any of these in case you're really curious. But yeah, once the late 70s hit with Suspiria, they were like, oh, we can go into supernatural territory. So Lucio Fulci does the psychic, Argento then does Inferno and Phenomena, and it kind of barrels down from there into either like crazy supernatural horror or zombie films. So... and again, the zombie films are not actually Giallo. I just want to note for clarification that I watched a lot of these in their original Italian mono that were provided by mostly Arrow Video, because they actually did most of the prints that I watched. The only ones where I kind of watched the English version were Argento films, because for the most part he had exported a lot of them, so there were some pretty decent English dubs, or most of the cast spoke in English and hence were dubbed in after the fact, because of like how he made them on a technical scale by basically being all this bullshit with the audio. So yeah, for the most part I tried to stay true to just watching the Italian versions with subtitles, but yeah, on the odd occasion I would watch a English dub version. If it was the main dub available, then I would just watch that, but if it was like
gave you the offering of, hey, you can watch the Italian version or the English version, then I'd go with the Italian one, especially for, again, the Argento ones, where they even exclaim, like, hey, watch the Italian version, it's the longer version, it'll have a hybrid cut with English and Italian, because we're missing some of the English parts, but they're still Italian parts, so I would watch those versions. So, yeah.
So I watched The Possessed. I'll have them all up on screen there. I watched The Possessed, which was a 1965 film. That one was more of a... it's a much more of a proto version of the Giallo. It's come out after Bava has established the genre, but it's still in black and white. It uses a lot of dreamlike imagery, so you don't really know what's going on sometimes, and that's the real quirk of it, which makes it a much more interesting film. That it's not a straight up someone gets murdered constantly. It's like, no, one person's being killed and the person's trying to investigate it, and it goes from there. But again, there's a lot of weird, trippy dream sequences that may not be real. That's really interesting. Then you've got The Fifth Chord, which was I think that was more of a Polizia Techie one. It's a Franco Nero film, if I'm not mistaken. This one is more of he's a journalist reporter, and he's trying to figure out who the killer is, and it's all his friends who are getting killed. A lot of these are also like aristocratic people, so they're like also dress really fancy and look really nice, and of course, you know, that's a big thing with these films. A lot of the time, it's upper to middle class people getting murdered, so when the lower class people go and watch it, they're like, yeah, screw you, upper class people. See, who needs the French with their bourgeoisie when you just have the Italians with, hey, let's just watch rich people getting killed, also getting naked, because they're usually gorgeous looking people. And they also look more gorgeous and stunning because of the cinematography and the costume design. Gotta love it. So that was 1971. Then in 1977, there's the Pajama Girl case, which is that one I mentioned before that's set in Australia. That one I didn't think as highly of, and I didn't really enjoy much of it, but it's still a solid film. It has some great elements to it, a good detective story, but then it's thrown in with this like melodramatic, almost Home and Away-esque story that I didn't care for, and then when the twist was revealed, I'm like, oh, okay then, sure, whatever. Then we have What Have They Done to Your Daughters? This one is part of the Yellow set, which most people consider to be one of the better of the Giallo Essentials Arrow video sets. What Have They Done to Your Daughters is definitely a straight-up Polizia Techie. It's police investigating. It's a very interesting crime film. Not as much slashing and dashing, which you kind of got to get used to the factor of not all of these are just straight-up slashes. Sure, people get murdered in these films, and sometimes the effects work is tremendous. Like, there wasn't like restrictions like the late 80s slasher films where they just kept cutting out all of the amazing kills because they wanted to get it released. Instead, it was... Some of these just don't put in the effort to actually make fun kills, but sometimes they do. But yeah, this one was a good Polizia Techie one. And it was one of the first ones of that style of genre that I kind of watched, where the main character is a cop, and it's very interesting. I still really liked it. It has a more dramatic story to it, more of a crime underworld, but yeah, but it's still got a masked killer, guy in a helmet. That's pretty cool. Then you got Torso from 1973, which is a Sergio Martino. I'll just see if I can credit some of these directors, but Martino's 1973 film. This one again, very much proto slasher. Really pivotal if you're really into the slasher films, or if you want to see a film where a lot of people get murdered. This is the one. It's got a very interesting plot. It's got a very interesting mystery. It's a really solid film as it is, and a really fun giallo. It kind of proves that Martino was really good at his form. So Martino is one of the underrated ones. I would definitely suggest his works. My only issue is I got two different sets with his films. I think I've got, four? I've got four of his films now. One of them is in the yellow set for Giallo. The other three are in the Sergio Martino collection, but one of those is The Suspicious Death of a Minor, which is also in one of the other Giallo Essential sets. So it crosses over a bit, which is a bit annoying. So, not perfect, but you know. Then you've got 1975's Strip Nude for Your Killer, which is an Andrea Bianchi film. I thought it was okay. This one is more of a sex comedy or just softcore porno with a through line of vengeful murders consistent in the Giallo style. That's probably the best way to put it. I think it might be Edwidge Fenech who's in it. She's in a bunch of really fun Giallos. She's stunning. She's one of those classic, like, when you start recognizing some of the actors and the actresses, you realize, oh my god, I want to stipulate that just for gender. Some of them are like, she's the girl, like, he's the guy. You recognize them from across the films, and you realize that some of them are just really good in these genres and really good in these styles of films. Then 1972, we've got Silvio Amadio's Smile Before Death, which I think is the weakest of the Giallos that I watched. It's definitely one of them. As a Giallo, it's not great. It's a murder mystery, but it's mostly an hour of just, let's watch this girl get naked and take photos, and then she has sex with people who are trying to blackmail her, and that's basically the movie. But then, like, the last 20 minutes has the most insane plot twist that keeps going plot twist upon plot twist upon plot twist. But again, I kind of called the twist very early at the start of the film, and even one of the things that becomes the kind of punchline at the end of the film was visually set up at the start, which was nice, but predictable as well. So not too surprising, but also kind of surprising. So I give it the benefit of the doubt because its ending was really fun, but the rest of it was basically just watching a girl get naked. So, I mean, sure, if you like that kind of stuff, then go for it. But, like, as a Giallo where I want more murder or more intrigue and more suspense, it's not giving me that. And a lot of the times I was hoping for more of that, and I wasn't always getting it. Then I've got The Weapon, The Hour, The Motive, which is a 1972 film by Francesco Mazzi, which I thought was really interesting as well. It plays more as a slow burn murder mystery. This is 105 minutes. There's some really great kills in it, some that are really by surprise, but it's more of a who killed this priest who may be sleeping around with a bunch of people. It's pretty fun for what it is. Then, actually, maybe the weakest, I don't know if this is the weakest one, The Killer Reserved 9 Seats, which is a 1974 film by Giuseppe Bonatti, which is a fun one-location murder mystery with a great masked killer, but the characters aren't very interesting. The reveal is really bad. It falls way on its head, and I didn't really like that about it. It has some fun kills and a great area for it being filmed in, but it's one of those, if I want a film set in a theatre, like an amphitheatre or an opera, I'll just watch an Argento film. He's got at least 2 that are like that, so yeah. Then we get to the really fun ones. I will note, just for the sake of it, if you're interested in these Giallo Essential sets, I really like the yellow one, the white one, and the blue one. The blue one was my favourite, shortly followed by the white one. The white one only has one film that I wasn't very big on, and kind of the same with the yellow one. 2 of the films are great, one of them films are like kind of okay. This is from the yellow set, which is The Night Evelyn Came Out of the Grave. If it helps, I'm going based on the set release order. I'm not actually going based on film release order. Which I kind of want to note because, I know, crazy ass poster, but I wanted to note that because I wanted to be jumping around in time and getting an idea of different styles and how things kind of evolved, rather than it being strictly, we're going straight from the 60s through to the late 80s. It's like, I don't need that. I could have done that, sure. I did do that by the second half of the month where I'd finished these essential sets, and I was like, okay, cool. Now I've done these essentials, I can go in chronological order of release and kind of see where the tentpoles came in. The high-strung, here's the big Bava ones, here's the big Argento ones, here's the big Martino ones, the big Fulci ones, the other ones that, like, tempoed around what the Giallo was and how it redefined the genre. So, The Night Evelyn Came Out of the Grave is an Emilio Miraglia film. It is so fun. It is much more gothic horror, which again was also some phases that some people went down. If they didn't go straight supernatural, it was gothic horror. And this one's wonderful. It still is a really bizarre film because it starts with the murderer who's the main character. And you're like, okay, how can I be interested in a guy who literally kills people just because they look like his ex-wife? And then it evolves from there, and it becomes, well, the title, let's say, becomes literal at some stage, and it is really, really fun. It's very visually inventive. It has some great sequences. Sure, the characters are all awful people, but it's also like, yeah, a lot of the time, the characters are awful people, in contrast to the Killer Reserve 9 seats, where all the people are awful, and you don't care about them, and you don't even really care when they die, because the film's kind of boring. At least this one's like, yeah, all these people are awful, and you want them to die, but you're also like, holy shit, I want to see where this goes, because this is getting, like, it's taken off. Then the next one, which is the weaker one of the set, the Iguana with the Tongue of Fire, which even when you watch, like, the videos, they had a bunch of, like, special features on each discs for these films, which is wonderful. It's a film I didn't care that much for, but it was not the worst of these films. It was overly complicated in its story. Some great kills, some funny characters, so it has some pluses, but the title, which does become a metaphor that is used in the film, is not accurate. Them saying the iguana with the tongue of fire. Iguanas don't do that. They're talking about a chameleon that can color shape, which it also doesn't. They only change 2 colors, and that's between their current color and what's below them, which is usually brown. Did you know that chameleons don't actually really change all their colors, but there's an octopus that does? I don't think it's the blue-ringed octopus, but there is an octopus that can literally go transparent, basically. That's a much cooler animal. But the tongue of fire, again, is just the fact that it can shoot out a tongue. Bam. Cool. It has no real relation. It's just a bad metaphor that one of the characters puts in. And, yeah. I don't think the killer reveal was great, but I think that a lot of the blood work is great. A lot of the kills are really fun. It became really intense by the end of it, because I was actually like, I like these characters and they're going to get murdered. Oh my god. So I give it props to that, but it is a very long... It's not even long, it's 92 minutes. It's just a very confusing film. This was the second Martino one I watched. The Suspicious Death of a Minor, which I gave 4 stars. I haven't really given star ratings to a lot of these as per se on the video, but of course you can check out my letterbox down below where I ranked and reviewed and talked in detail about all these films. This one was really fun. This one, the twist in it, because again, Martino does this thing where he's like, oh, we're going to have a film and do shit, and then there's going to be a huge twist that dramatically changes the whole entire film. Very Psycho-esque, and he does that in this one, where you don't realize, and it's not really that much of a twist, but for the first 30 odd minutes, you don't realize the main character is a detective. And there's this whole insane action chase sequence, and it's really fun. And then it reveals it at the end, oh my god. So this is when Martino himself, because I've watched some of his earlier works also in this viewing, that he clearly, when he started to change genres and shift up and do different... He's an action film, he's a comedy, he's a horror film. He would end up blending them together later on, and this is one of those where he blends it together. It's a great action film, it's got some good comedic moments, some great characters. I really enjoyed this one. This is one of my favorites that I watched. I actually prefer this to Torso, but Torso does land with its last act, because the last act of Torso is remarkable. But I really, really enjoyed Suspicious Death of a Minor. Then, for the blue set, which is the Collie films, started with The Forbidden Photos of a Lady Above Suspicion, which initially I wasn't huge on because it was mostly a blackmail film, and sure, they can be quite tense, but I wasn't really feeling it. But then the last act kind of shifted it, where it's oh, we're not just doing blackmail, we're doing gaslighting and revenge, and I'm like, oh shit, this film just kind of leveled up. It had everything slowly set up for the guise of blackmail, and then it really hit, and it really nailed its last act. So yeah, it was a fun first one to watch of his. But Neves Navarro is whose credit is Susan something. She's in it. She is fantastic. I didn't really realize that she was in it until I watched the next film, where she's much more prominent, and it's clearly one of those. Even there's a essay, I think, in the third film, the Death Walks at Midnight, where a guy was comparing all the 3, and he's like, you can definitely tell that when he did Suspicious, this film here, that he hadn't exactly perfected what he wanted to do or who he wanted to cast, but then once he'd finished this film, he's like, okay, I like this actress, I like this actor, we're going to put them in my next film, and then put them in the film after that. So, of course, the next film is Death Walks on High Heels, which was my favorite favorite film that I watched. I really loved it. I loved the characters. I loved the blood. I loved the gore. I loved the twists, the narrative. It was all compelling. It was fun. It was interesting. I mean, I gave this 4.5 stars. Like, I don't just do that for any goddamn Giallo, which is really funny. Like, looking at the people who I follow who have given it reviews, and it's like, oh, 4.5 stars for one. My person called Fredo Films, who I follow, who him and I like a lot of the same Giallos. But then there's like the rest of the people I follow gave it like 2.5 to 3 stars. I'm like, all right, sure, go for it, whatever. But Neves Navarro is great in it. I think it might be, is it Simon Andre? No. Oh no, Simon Andre is in it. He's very good in it. But there's another guy in it. It's not. No, it's not. Oh, it might be. I don't think it's Carlo. One of the other actors in the film who's very good in it, I think passed away, but he might have been in the next film. But yeah, no, Death Walks on Higher Heels was really fun. And the last one was Death Walks at Midnight, which I really liked as well. And again, another Neves Navarro one with Simon Andreu. Anyway, these were the last two, or the last three I watched for these just Giallo Essentials sets. And, I mean, they were just really fun in general, going from, like, 1971 to 1972 to, I think, 1970 to 1972. So, yeah. it was just a fun way to top it off. I'm, like, thinking, man, it's kind of crazy how my favorite of the sets was the last set, and they're all done by the same guy. So, yeah, I definitely recommend these two films. At least Death Walks at Midnight and Death Walks at High Heels, which you can also get as a separate set. I'm pretty sure it's out of print, but still. Yeah, those were more of the classic whodunit, but also here are some great kills, here's a compelling mystery, it's going to keep going and going, it's just, it's a lot of fun. The F. Jolly one was the Death Walks at Midnight, where they're like, Neves Navarro is going to be in the whole goddamn picture, and she's going to, like, figure this shit out, because the detectives are stupid. Anyway, the second half of the month I spent watching a bunch I'd already seen, and some that I hadn't, but all of these were in chronological release order. So I started with Blood and Black Lace from 1964, mostly because I'd watched it in October of last year for my Hooptober, but I had the 4K UHD come in. I wanted to watch it. So I figured, yeah, let's look at what like really defined the genre, aside from his earlier film with the girl who knew too much. And it's beautifully shot. It's a great murder mystery. It's really fun how they play with the villain. There's a lot of different elements to it that you're like, it's so crazy how a lot of the films ended up just becoming the villain reveal happens in the last 2 minutes of the film. But this film, it's like, nah, fuck that. We're just, screw that stuff. We're doing it, like, really early on. And I like how they did that. How they played with that trope before it became a trope. So it's like, oh, well, Bartha did it differently. Let's do it differently to Bartha for the next 15 years. I don't know. It's a beautiful film. It's such a rich color palette. A great, like, bouncy soundtrack, some fun characters as well, like, everyone just looks devilish and deceiving, and it's really fun, and it is one of those, oh, they're all models, so some of them are gonna get naked, I think, maybe not, I think they're just all models, but most of them just die, so, anyway, so I followed that up with, because I couldn't get my hands on Bay of Blood or anything like that, so I watched The Bird of the Crystal Plumage, another one I watched the 4K UHD of. This is a rewatch for me, and I really dug it this time. It's really interesting seeing how some of these can just be really simply shot films that just look great because they're Technicolor, they're film. There's a lot of great color and, stuff to it, but it's the ones that have a lot of visual striking, like they actually play with the visual techniques that can be really fun. Some of them can be just like, why is he doing this visual technique that wasn't brought in throughout the whole film and is never done again? Who cares? It's fun. But someone like, Argento, he obviously comes into the game and is like, hey, let's make shit really fun. And it's a really fun movie. The characters are really interesting. Despite having seen it before, the murder mystery is still really interesting, even knowing who the killer is. Yeah, I don't know. I really, really liked it. I mean, I gave it 4.5 stars. I think I did the same for Blood and Black Lace, so I mean, what can I say? And also the 4K UHD looked tremendous, so... Then I watched The Case of the Scorpion's Tail, which was a very early Martino one before the other two, which I think latter career Martino is much better than earlier career, or at least in the 70s, because this was the first one of his, I think, in release order I watched. And by this stage, I'd already seen Suspicious Death of a Minor and Torso, which are better films, but this one's still good. I didn't like it as much, but it was still a really solid murder mystery that kept winding and churning. And it was really entertaining to watch. So, and again, he knows how to shoot a film, so it's fun. And then I watched the Cat O' Nine Tails again, an Argento, which I didn't love as much this time. I gave it 3.5. I think I gave it 4 stars last time. But it felt like, despite being still a fun and beautiful looking film throughout, it was really fun when the blind guy was on the scene. Every single time the blind guy was there, I was like, this is the good shit, But it's like, it's just that thing of like, here's a great premise. A blind guy happens to overhear a conspiracy to kill someone and all this stuff, and then the main character is a goddamn journalist? Come on! So, like, obviously there's restrictions on what you can do when you've got a blind guy doing stuff, but I mean, like, come on. Missed opportunity. But it still is really fun. It's got an interesting ending, to say the least, but I wasn't overly fussed by it by the end of it. I was kind of a lot more disappointed by the film than I was in love with it, because I was like, I liked this one a lot more the first time I watched it, but I couldn't remember much outside of a blind guy, and he's like adoptive daughter. So yeah, films are what they are. And then I actually went back in time to 1970 because my friends lent me Hatchet for the Honeymoon, another Barber film, which was like, great, I can watch another Barber film that's actually a Giallo. Because I have a bunch of these, and not all of them are Giallos. They end up becoming like supernatural films or like alien invasion stuff or whatever. Like, yeah, because I got like Black Sabbath and Black Sunday, Kill Baby Kill. Like, I was going to watch a bunch of those, but they're not Giallos. So I was like, oh, okay, then I just won't watch them then. I do want to rewatch Black Sabbath, but yeah, I have seen Black Sunday before. It's a good film. But Hatchet for the Honeymoon was really fun. Another classic, just... It starts off as a great slasher film, and then it's like, oh, now we're doing ghost stuff. And it's like, oh, okay, I'm... Like, if you don't dig the ghost stuff, you won't like it. But if you do, you'll love it. And I really enjoyed it. So I thought it was really fun. And I'm like, man, Bava just... He's good, man. He's just good. But then in contrast, I watched Four Flies on Grey Velvet, which is an Argento film. He's third of the Animal Trilogy, which I watched on Plex. I should have watched it on YouTube. I didn't realize it was on YouTube for free. Hooray. Go watch on YouTube for free. It's like the... it's not Seven. What's the other one? Shameless Films did a Blu-ray release of it, which is like an uncut version, which isn't the best looking version, but it's like the best full, complete, uncut version that you can get. That's the version that's up online that you can watch for free. I watched it on, again, Plex, which came with ads, which was really annoying. If I had known it was on YouTube, I probably would have enjoyed the film a bit more, but kind of in general, I didn't really dig the film that much. Like, to know that a lot of people consider this, again, his lost masterpiece, and I'm like watching it like, it has a great opening 10 minutes, and sure, the last couple minutes of the film is fantastic and just like the most mind-blowing shit, but it's also like, it feels like he has a great premise, and then the rest of it, there's nothing there. Like, it's, oh, premise, isn't it cool? Here's the first 10 minutes of such an intriguing concept, and then the rest of the movie is just, how about a bunch of characters that don't do anything, a bunch of red herrings, a few murders, and some weird comedic stuff which did not fit the tone. So I didn't really dig it that well, which was very disappointing because I was really excited to watch it, and I was hoping that it would be amazing because I was like, oh, well, I mean, like, his previous 2 films were good, and this one was like, man, this is kind of the weakest one. It felt like he'd run out of ideas and just didn't know how to make things fun again. So again, then he did his weird action film, and then that failed, so he went back to doing slashes, but we'll get there in a minute. Then I watched Lucio Fulci's Don't Torture a Duckling, which I gave 4.5 stars. This was one of the better, definitely the better ones I watched. It was much more of a dramatic film than it was like a fun, bouncy slasher, but it's still very strongly in the Giallo sense of, murder mystery and whatever. It's a lot more graphic than I expected. A lot more dour, not a very happy, joyful film. Simply put, it's like how, life kind of sucks sometimes, and that's what this movie's about. I mean, the title's pretty on the nose there in a way. It's more symbolic. it's one of the few Giallos that has kids in it. A lot of these Giallos, outside of like teenagers, or which are usually just like 18, 19-year-olds, probably just for legal reasons, don't have kids in them. There's one of them that did. I can't remember which film it was, but there was a film I had watched in this list that had like a scene with kids in it, and it wasn't like, I was like, what is happening here? It might have been an Okoli one. It doesn't matter, but it's like you don't really ever see kids in these films, which is really interesting. Like occasionally, sure, maybe they might pop up as like background characters, but like as like main actors that are like pivotal to the plot, you don't always, they're not really there. But this one has that, and it's like, oh, it's kind of fucked up, but it's really effective. So yeah, I don't know. It was good. It was very good. I highly recommend it. It's one of Fulci's best, I think. It's definitely my favorite of his that I've watched so far. So, and then I watched another Martino, which was Your Vice is a Locked Room and Only I Have a Key. Only I Have the Key, which I thought was very good. It was based on The Black Cat, which is a Edgar Allan Poe story, which I didn't really realize, even though it was in the opening credits. This is the last of the Sergio Martino collection Blu-ray set from Arrow. And again, it's a solid film. It's got a great ending. It's got an interesting style to it. It's like, hey, we're gonna do the slasher films. We're gonna do that regular stuff, and then they catch the killer, and then the rest of the film still has like 40 odd minutes, 50 odd minutes left. You're only halfway through the film before they catch the killer, so it's like, oh, so it just kind of keeps going from there. It's a really interesting film and a great title as well. Then, per suggestion from some friends, I watched The Red Queen Kill 7 Times. It was done by Emilio Miraglia, the guy who did The Night Evelyn Came Out of the Grave. He did this one just before it, and two of the characters being called Evelyn is a really interesting coincidence. Probably deliberate, but you know. This one was really fun as well. Again, it's very on the nose in terms of its title. The Red Queen Kill 7 Times. It's very much, you're going to get what you're going to get from that alone. And again, another classic whodunit. There's a great twist reveal, all the kind of overly complicated twist reveals. Like, at least some of them have fun with it. You look at bloody Four Flies and Grey Velvet, and there's like a 5-minute long monologue explaining why the killer is the killer, and half of it's in Italian because they don't have the English anymore. So, yeah, can't say that was good, but this one was very good. It was fun. It was some great kills. Some beautiful cinematography, set in the castle for like half the movie, which is great, you know, catacombs and shit, I love it. And then I did probably the masterpiece, the best Giallo I've ever seen, Deep Red, Profondo Rosso, which I watched the 4K UHD, it was fucking stunning. I introduced it to my girlfriend who had never seen it before, because she hasn't seen many actually, she's never seen a Giallo. And this was mostly a thing because the first film I introduced her to was Suspiria. For the 101st film, I figured I'd show her the next one, Profondo Rosso. She loved it, and I loved it, and it was just, it has everything I love in the standard slasher, the Argento film, his visual style, the crazy effects work, the fact that you can know who the killer is really early on if you're paying attention, and then if you don't, it's still like, oh my god, what's happening? And then even if you do know who the killer is, it's like, this is the best thing I've ever seen. This is so fun. Daria Nicolodi is in it. She's fantastic. I love her in this film. David Hemmings is really good as well. Pretty good English cross dub. It was the hybrid one I had to watch because it was the only one that had the full version. But it was good. Really enjoyable. Then I watched Don't Look Now. Yeah, the Nicholas Roeg film. Did you know this is considered as a Giallo? It is. It's people, and they're in Italy, Venice, obviously, in particular. And there's actually a murder mystery happening in the background while these characters are going through, like, oh, you know how grief kind of sucks because our daughter drowned? Yeah, that. So, of course, when your daughter drowns, go to the wettest city in the universe. No, not Vegas. This one. Vegas. It's a stunning film. It's like, as a craft, it is exceptional. Because it's more of a British cinema, it's got more, not really nuance, just something else to it. It's got a great editing style, great visual style. The characters are great. Great romance relationship between Donald Sutherland and Julie Christie. So, yeah. just a masterpiece of a film, and a really interesting giallo for what it is. Like, you wouldn't really think it's a giallo, but it has the tropes. The tropes are there. It's a giallo. I followed that up with Lucio Fulci's The Psychic, which I thought was good, but I didn't love it. It's one of those films where it's like, I don't know if we're meant to kind of get immediately what's going on, because it's about a woman who sees a murder happen in a vision, and then she tries to piece it together, and they uncover a body, and they're like, oh my god, but this means that her husband is a killer. So now they're going to prove that her husband's not a killer. And the vision that she has implies something else. And I was like, immediately like, oh, this isn't like, the whole thing is, it's like she sees something that's already happened, but it's like, yeah, I don't think that's already happened. I think there's something about this that she doesn't realize, that then one of the other characters realizes and points out, and she doesn't compute it. And it's like a big dramatic thing that she's stupid. So yeah, I didn't love it for that reason, and it shares the ending with it basically rips off the ending from the Taking of Pelham 1, 2, 3. So for those reasons alone, I can't really give it huge praise. It still is good, but it isn't the masterpiece that I think a lot of people say it is, because I'm just like, am I meant to be in on the joke that, like, we know what these visions are and she doesn't, and that's what makes it more tense, because she doesn't know, which I can understand, like, not as a she's stupid, but as a, to make it more tense, she doesn't know, and then when she does, it becomes like a piece by piece as she's slowly putting in the puzzle pieces and she's figuring it out. And it's like, yeah, sure, as a use of tension and dramatic effect, it works, but as an overall, I was like, I don't know if I'm meant to be in on the joke or not. I think I need someone to tell me that I'm meant to be in on the joke. Also, great musical theme. They use it in Kill Bill. It's great. It's beautiful. Wonderful score. I will note, for the most part, a lot of these scores are terrific. Some of them are Ennio Morricone, which are usually really good, but usually when you differ from Ennio Morricone, sometimes the scores can be really vibrant and different. Again, like the Bava ones, some of the later Argento, when he gets Goblin in and stuff like that, there's some really great scores. A good film, a good giallo will have its good kills, a good twist, and a good score. So, yeah, worth noting. Then I watched Inferno, which, yeah, the sequel to Suspiria, because I rewatched Suspiria, actually, which, again, not a giallo, but, masterpiece, whatever. Inferno I didn't love as much. I only gave it, like, 3 stars, because I'm like, it's like it has the facade of what Suspiria has, and you might think, well, if Inferno's a giallo, why isn't Suspiria? It's like, because Inferno has an actual, like, gloved killer going around killing people, whereas, in Suspiria doesn't. It's all witches. I know it's still witches in goddamn Suspiria in Inferno, but there's more to it. The Inferno benefits from having a fantastic last 7 odd minutes. I've got a timer on my Blu-ray player, and I'm like, yeah, the last 7 minutes, tremendous. The rest of the film, kind of air. The opening is good. I really liked it. There's a great jump scare, which I still get scared by. It's really fun. The whole opening sequence is really fun, the first, 10 or so minutes. But then it just keeps cutting between different characters, and then those characters keep dying, and I'm just like, what the fuck is going on? Why? What is happening? It just didn't... As much as it still looks great and it's got great production design, it still feels like it's a lot of a carbon copy, because where you compare it to Suspiria, where it has such contrast and different production design, everything looks different but the same, but different and constantly evolving. Inferno just all looks like the same small set. It looks so restrictive. I didn't really vibe with it. So yeah. And then last but not least, I watched Phenomena, Argento's 1985 film. I was thinking Tenebrae, or even Opera, and I should rewatch Tenebrae, because Opera I watched last year for the first time in October for my Hooptober, and I thought that was a really solid film. That was probably my favourite of his, until rewatching Phenomena and rewatching Deep Red. I loved Phenomena this time around. I didn't care much for it the first time I watched it, but watching it this time, I'm just like, this film's really good. I hadn't watched it since 2021, which is ridiculous. But it is a stunning film, and I really, really liked it. It's one of those films that it's really crazy when you first watch it. It is, unless you're in it immediately, it can be like, what is this? What's going on? I don't understand. But then when you are rewatching it, you're like, oh, actually, this is really fun. It's really creative. It's really crazy. It's got a great killer. Dario Niccolotti is fantastic in it. Probably my favorite role of hers next to Deep Red. Um, Jennifer Connelly is great. Donald Pleasance is wonderful. The monkey is wonderful. It's got some great effects work, some great scenes. Then the music is fucking mental. It's just like randomly cuts to like heavy metal music in the middle of a scene. It is so funny. It's really fun. And it was a great way to send off these 29 films. What did I think as an overall in terms of my Gialloruary? I do think it was a worthwhile endeavor. It got to the point where I was watching some of the films and thinking, man, these are kind of boring, these are kind of bad. And I'm thinking, am I getting tired of the genre? But then I'd watch another film the next day and I'd be like, actually, no, the film was just bad. Like, I just needed, like, this next film I'm watching is actually really goddamn good. Like, the thing is, you can't barrel it down to one specific thing of, like, it's the Western. It's such a, the Giallo is such an encompassing genre. It picks up, and people even call it a subgenre. It's such a broad concept of all these little things, you know, all these checklisted things, which some films will be like, I'm going to use those couple of things, like the masked killer, the crazy twist, the great kills, and I'm going to use, in this film, I'm going to have a gloved killer, and they're going to strangle a lot of people, and the twist is that it's incest. Like, you know, or you know, a lot of sex and nudity here, a lot of obscene deaths there, some action sequences, some Polizia crazy soundtrack, crazy score, crazy visuals, you know, wonderful casts. It's really fun to watch them and to get, you know, see all of this stuff evolve and clash and whatever, and it's like the slasher genre of the 80s. You can see its rise, its peak, and its fall. You know, I think the benefit for the Giallo is that they're whodunit murder mysteries, and because it's such a broad thing of, oh, well, if you're really into the sleazy exploitation sex stuff, you'll love this side of it. If you really like the over-the-top murder, like kill, 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 blood, gore, whatever, you'll like this side of it. If you like the whodunit murder mysteries and you're really there to figure out who the killer is, you'll like this, because that is a mixture of both of the two parks. You get your sleazy shit, you get your over-the-top kills, and you get an interesting murder mystery, or a really bad murder mystery that's really complicated, but it still does resolve itself in the end because of a big exposition monologue. So yeah, it's very interesting. You can't really compare it as a Venn diagram of 1, 2, and 3 because it's all they mix and match. But yeah, I would suggest a whole bunch of these. Again, if you want a good, in-depth look at what I thought, check out the Letterboxd link down below. And yeah, let me know your thoughts. If you've seen any of these films, if you have any in particular you like, whether it's Bava, or it's Argento, or Fulci, or Colli, or Martino. Yeah, and let me know if you've got a favourite actress or whatever, or if this is your introduction to it. For the most part, if you have never seen Giallos before, I would definitely suggest Bava or Fulci, Martino, and Argento. All of them have great peak Giallo stuff, but even then, if you watch something like Deep Red, which was the first ever Giallo I watched, and then thinking, well, if this is the best of it, I won't watch anything else. That's like the best of that type of guy witnesses murder, tries to figure it out. But then you got so many other different types of Giallo in between, and that's what's so great about it. So I really enjoyed watching all of these. Sure, some of them weren't great, but it is what it is, and I highly recommend watching them. Yeah, again, go take a look and I don't know, make your own mind up as to what you think of the genre. It's fun. I really enjoyed it. Alright, that's it for now. See you guys next time. Adios.